Through the Leadership Lens is sponsored by Irish Propane Corporation, serving Western and Central New York. For all your residential and commercial propane needs, choose Irish Propane. Irish Propane is a locally operated, New York State certified, woman-owned business. For more information, visit irishpropane.com. Irish Propane delivers peace of mind.
Hello and welcome to another Through the Leadership Lens, a podcast presented by the Women in Propane Council. I am Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd.
And today we have a special guest with us, Christina Armentano. She is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Paraco Gas. Welcome, Christina, to the podcast.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here today.
Great. Thanks for coming, Christina. Hey, so Christina, as you know, we talk about leadership on this podcast, and it usually goes off on a couple different tangents, which makes it just a bit more fun. But to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do in your role, but then also what kind of leader are you?
Sure, happy to. So for me, I am, as mentioned, the Chief Operating Officer at Paraco Gas. So underneath my umbrella is the Operations Division, Logistics, Customer Experience, Sales, Acquisitions, really everything outside of HR, IT, and finance. So it has been a great journey. I've been with the organization for about 8 years. I had close to a 10-year career outside of the family business previously. And for me as a leader, I really believe in leadership. Your role is to coach, to guide, to inspire others, and to mentor.
Great. And since you brought up mentorship, I'm going to make a bit of an assumption here. Heard both you and your dad talk a lot about your grandfather and the influence that your grandfather, Pat Armentano, had on the business. So can you talk, maybe this is the mentor you've most notably impacted your career, but how has mentorship impacted your career and your view of leadership?
So for me, especially being part of a family business, even though I did not come into the family business right out of college, I was exposed to business at a very, very young age. Like many others that are part of a family business, not only does it happen behind the walls at the office, but it spills over into the Sunday afternoon dinners, walks with the dog, everything you can possibly imagine. So at such a young age, I got to see my family really interact on various topics, business topics. I also had the opportunity to travel with my dad, again, at a pretty young age, attending board meetings. Pretty sure I was maybe 10, 11 years old. So being exposed has always been very beneficial. From a mentorship perspective, obviously key members of my family have really lent themselves to that mentee-mentor relationship. But as I've really gone through this leadership journey, it's transitioned where I've had the opportunity to mentor others as well. And it's interesting to see how valuable that relationship is, not only where you think you're adding value to the mentee, but how much you learn. So I have a mentee right now that I meet with on a pretty consistent basis. And every time we have a conversation, there's something that inspires me, that opens up my eyes, that makes me think about how I need to do things a bit differently. So I value both sides of that relationship so much.
And I heard you use the word leadership. What is it to me? And you said the word inspire. And that's a really common word we hear quite a bit. And I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We usually say what inspires you, but I'm going to change that to who inspires you, Christina? Who has been an inspiration in your life?
I look back on kind of the pivotal moments that I've had within my career, and to your point, who inspires me? So clearly, the easy answer is obviously my grandfather and my father. Looking and seeing the hard work that they've put in, throughout their career. And then prior to my grandfather passing, starting a organization really from absolutely nothing. Some people know the story. My grandfather was the youngest of 10 kids, actually born in 1929. So kind of a big year as we start to think of the Depression, and really just that entrepreneurial spirit that created something. I look at his history and I look at what he's created and where I am today. And there honestly isn't one day that goes by that I don't think about how grateful I am to be part of this organization and to be in the role that I'm in today. And I think about it and I really value it. There's other individuals that have inspired me throughout my career. I had a mentor very early on, one of my first jobs out of college, a company called Boyden Global Executive Search. I worked for a woman named Jeannie Branover. She had started her own organization, her executive search firm, and then spun it off to a much larger worldwide corporation. And watching what she had created and how she continued to lead this organization really had a significant impact on me. And then the third, which is somewhat different, is my family really inspires me. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and the 7-year-old is very let's see, how do I put it? Outspoken, very, she's 7, but she acts like she's a lot older. And I very much learn from them and what they do. And many times there's these business lessons. Sometimes I've posted about it that happens in these personal moments that I can always connect back to the business world.
We share that in common, Christina. We both have young kids, and I think it's so important and such an opportunity to kind of take those parallels, right? And we talk about it a little bit on the podcast about as a mom and as a member of a community and you're coaching or volunteering, you can pull some of those lessons into what you're doing. And I think it's important. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I talk to my kids very openly about there's probably nobody who makes more mistakes every day than me, right? And you got to learn from them and move on. And I think we are so inclined to talk about things that go really well. And you look at, these mentors that you have and, these companies that are built on generations. But can you talk to us about a time that maybe something didn't go as well as planned and how you navigated out of that?
So thinking of a time where I have made an error or a mistake and really had to reflect back on it. So when reflecting back on, I would call even a failure, when I was applying to business school, I had to, like everyone else, take the GMATs. And I am not a great test taker. I am actually a horrible test taker. And I was adamant on getting in and getting into a great school. So I worked incredibly hard. I studied. I did all the right things. And I just kept taking that test and I just kept failing. And when I say failing, it was a low enough score that I knew I was going to have a challenge getting in. And I think I took the test 3 different times. And then I started to realize, after being really frustrated and somewhat demotivated, that there is other ways around this, and worked incredibly hard, networking as much as possible to at least try to land a interview at the school of choice, which was Babson. And I ended up getting the interview and went in and knew in my head as I was walking into the door, I had one shot to hopefully wow the interviewer. And I was really open and honest about the scores and where I thought I had some challenges, and very much committing to what I thought I could bring to the table. But I think that was my first real point of vulnerability. And long story short, ended up getting into the school, pending some additional testing that they did, that I was able to excel at. And it really showed me, listen, there's going to be times, and this is just one of many, where you hit a wall. And you just have to be creative and think outside the box. Never take no for an answer. And if there's a will, there's a way. And that's always been something I've lived by. And this is where it's actually played out in real life.
That's great. And
That's
that's
great.
so true. And that's something that you think all the time in your life. And I don't know, I mean, I think it applies to everybody, but I think for women, oftentimes you want to fit the same regimen as everybody else. And I think that's such a great testament to saying there shouldn't be one thing for everyone, and there isn't one thing for everyone. And that's awesome.
Yep.
That's a
I
great
love how you just found another avenue to take too. I tell this to my kids all the time. The reason why people fall is to get back up. And that's true in life. We fail to do better. And I love how you just found that you couldn't succeed doing this, or you admitted that you need to find a different way to take, the tests weren't working in your favor. So what do? Take that, accept that, and just take a different avenue to find the better path. So I like to hear that. Thank you for sharing that.
I've always been a big believer that when you take a misstep, you need to realize it and pivot quickly.
Yeah. And speaking about adjustments, you've been you said Perico for 8 years, but you've done a lot more than that previous, obviously. The world changes with leadership. The way we organize our teams, whether by age, pre or post COVID, there's a lot of changes that we have to constantly put into play when we put together teams and be that leader. Can you give us your thoughts on how your leadership has changed based on, time, COVID, generations, things like that?
Sure, happy to. So I'll hit on COVID last, but I would say over time, I've become more open. So what do I mean by that? And it's crazy to think I've been in the professional world now for 18 years. And I actually had to look back at that number and say, okay, is that accurate? Because time just flies by, right? And thinking through my leadership style and how has it emerged over time, I would say I was in the beginning much more guarded with who I am and how I interact with my team. And over time have learned to become much more vulnerable. As we had mentioned earlier, in the podcast, talking about discussing your mistakes and talking about challenges, being more vulnerable and being more open with my team and being more of myself, I think has lent its way to a better leadership style. The second piece of that, looking about now post COVID, this environment that we're in, I've definitely had to think about time differently. I was incredibly used to a work environment, even before coming to Perico, where it is I'll call it even 7 to 7, right? Job. Now it's very different. I have team members that are still working somewhat remotely, that will get their work done off hours, that will get their work done on the weekends, will be accessible throughout the day, but it's a different way of looking at work. The other piece is getting used to this interaction that's happening over the computer versus face to face. And that's been a change for me. But I do believe if you really figure out what the best way of communicating with your team is, you keep it consistent and also are able to define what those communication modes are, this can happen very easily and very successfully.
Yeah, we talk. I think you hit on something with the vulnerability and your experiences too, right? When you come out of college or grad school and you start a career, you have those moments where you learn things and then you pivot and say, gosh, that maybe that person or that experience impacted me more than I thought.
Yes.
And I think for us and our organization, working remote has been part of the equation. But there's new technology that's brought in, and there's new ways of doing things and new standards, and you have to I feel like this, you have to constantly be open to some new way of doing things or a new style. How do you keep yourself up to date on what's available and learning and growing so that you can lead your team to whatever the next place is?
I am a huge believer in professional development. So, a couple things I do. Number one, I'm an avid reader. And when I say reader, oftentimes it's going to be on an audible book while I'm driving, but still basically the same. So, I love just learning as much as I can. I love listening to TED Talks. That's another thing that I'm constantly just listening to. Um, every morning on my way to work, I actually listen to the Wall Street Journal because it has the ability to hear while you're driving. So just trying to look at articles and information that is out there. Number two, I am part of a professional organization called Vistage Worldwide. It is a CEO group that meets collectively on a monthly basis. I've been part of that group for 3 years, and we bring in other speakers. We do something called issue processing, where we discuss challenges that we have within our business. And this group, Vistage, I brought to our company as well, in which I have some of our emerging leaders actively involved in the group. And then there is a key group that we have some of our more senior level members involved with. So it is very much front and center of all that we do. Lastly, when I have my core team meeting, I meet with my team collectively on a monthly basis. There's always a professional development component that is part of that meeting. So we're not only going over status updates and changes within the organization, but what are we each doing to be better than we were yesterday?
That's so interesting. What could you share with us some of those topics? Because that may be something that our listeners that's attainable,
Mhm.
right? What are those types of ideas that you have?
Absolutely. We could talk about goal setting. So, what are our objectives in the upcoming year? We talk about presentation skills sometimes, not only presentation as you think about getting on stage, but how are you showing up every day? One of my favorite quotes of all time is everything communicates. So, how are you showing up to a meeting? Do you have your computer open? Are you distracted by email? Are you there? Are you in the moment? Other topics we've talked about, LinkedIn. How are you using it as a network tool for
Mhm.
sales opportunities, acquisition opportunities, developing talent? So it really kind of runs the gamut of the different topics that we talk through. And oftentimes there's either a book or an article we read in advance, or even a movie if it's something that could be potentially inspiring.
That's so
Wow.
nice. I mean, we hear all the time, and I feel this way. I think everybody does. It's so nice to have a component of your workday once a month, quarterly, that helps you become more, and maybe not just applicable to your everyday life, which is, I think that's so refreshing to hear, and a great takeaway for anybody to incorporate.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
was sitting here listening, thinking maybe you should be doing the podcast, Christina. Great information. I really like that. It's fun to like Bridget said. That's really important. That's what we're trying to do is get our listeners to not only get to know who you are, but to listen to what you do and how you do it to become that leader. Because you're on this show and this podcast, I should say, because the Women Propane Council saw you as someone that we could learn from. So that's thank you for touching on that area a little bit deeper. Speaking about leadership skills, a lot of it's inside the office, but yet, we want to bring that leadership outside the office. We want to be able to do things for the community. We want people to know that not only are we a leader in the office, but, the reason you're doing these volunteer jobs or these, extracurricular activities outside the office, we want people to know that you are more than just a leader in that work life, but you're your community. Can you share some of your leadership skills that you do within your community?
Absolutely. So we are, as a company, very actively involved in a variety of different nonprofits that are out there. But one I want to speak to has been the work I've done for an organization called Dress for Success. And they have chapters all throughout the United States, but the one I'm involved in has been in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And really unbelievable organization where you are working specifically with women who are, I'll say, restarting their life. So either they are transitioning from a relationship, and this is the first time they've had to go into the workforce. Some of these women have been incarcerated, so now they're coming out and they're again starting their journey for a new career. Maybe they've had challenges with their current working situation and they're making a change from one area to another. And I've had the opportunity to do some work with this group most recently. And when I say most recently, it feels like forever ago. I had an opportunity to sit down with these women face to face and really talk about my story and my experience. And it was one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. And it was because, and I know everyone says this and it sounds like such a cliche, but you really learn so much from being around these individuals who have struggled and have had challenges. And they're just unbelievably inspiring stories that make you want to be better. So that's a group that, again, I'm very passionate about. Our organization actually has a leader who heads up all of our community involvement. So we really, really believe in giving back to the community. So there are, very large scale organizations that touch our entire footprint that we're very involved in. And we also do work with very localized community ventures near some of our depots. So we are incredibly passionate about giving back, but it's not only from a financial perspective, but also really rolling up your sleeve and being there and making a difference.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions that we like to ask is, how do you keep your team motivated? And I think you've mentioned two things already with professional development and community involvement, which are just incredible. And you think to have an organization the size of Perico with the number of moving parts that's still dedicated to that is just a testament to the company. But are there other things that you do maybe to keep your team motivated? And certainly we're living in a time where criticism is forthcoming of the industry that we're all in. And how do you inspire your team to stay the course?
I think the most important thing that we do outside of the professional development, and what I try to very much do with my team, is become a sounding board for them. I've tried to transition as much as possible from being that leader who's saying, okay, you need to do A, B, and C, and this is how you do A, B, and C, but much more of here's the vision and here's the objective. Now work towards solving this and giving the team the opportunity to make those mistakes, which can be really hard when you very much want to be a leader that's hand-holding and helping them through that process. But what I found is the outcome, especially from a leadership perspective, really teaches somebody how to flourish by themselves, how to grow. And that's been very beneficial. And also allowing this environment where people can make mistakes. It's always said, let your team, make their mistakes and then they'll grow. But actually having an environment where they don't have that fear of failure is critical, because we can get to that point of analysis by paralysis, I guess they say, and the inability to make a decision. I've always expressed to my team, making a decision is better than not making one. And then we sit and we learn from the mistake when it happens, and then you learn from there. So that's a piece of it. I think another part of the motivation is the team culture. I have a text message chain with almost our entire leadership team. And what we'll do is there'll be songs, that'll get shared in the morning. There will be reviews that come out, and it's just a simple text chain. It's not any other crazy technology. And we just got voted best of the best for Long Island as a propane provider. Just came out last week. So that was something that we shared with the team. So just that way for everyone to get excited. If someone's been featured in BPN or LP Gas or any of the other publications, sharing those photos, recognizing the hard work, the recognition is critical. So we do that. I do that with the team on a pretty frequent basis.
That's so nice. And it's just a nice, you hear your phone text go off, and that's a nice kind of positive moment to highlight the team's victories. That sounds awesome.
That's fun. And I was going to ask the question, can you measure leadership? And you already answered that. Being published in BPN, having your text messages, everyone getting excited about what you've accomplished. I think those are all great, ways to measure leadership. But I'm going to ask it anyways, and maybe you can go in a little more detail of it. But that's a fun question I like to ask is, how do you measure leadership within your company and within yourself?
So another quote I love is, you don't want to be the king, you want to be the king maker. So when you look at leadership and you look at your team and you look at your leader's team, how much is that individual spending on building up others? Is it all about themselves, or is it all about their team? So when I define success for a leader, it's someone who really understands that they are only as successful as the members of their team. That's it. So, being able to have others who have been promoted within the organization, or even if they go outside of the organization and they have this successful, fulfilling, value added role, that's what makes a great leader. Helping others accomplish their successes is what makes a strong leader.
That's great.
Yep.
I
Very
love
good.
that. I love that.
One of the best answers I've heard. That's really good to hear that, Christina.
Well, the coffee's kicking in, it sounds like.
It takes that. I'll ask one more question. And it's a little bit unrelated, but you've talked a lot about raising other people up and delegating. And that maybe in the beginning of your career and the beginning of your time as a leader, that wasn't your strength. What were some of those pivotal moments that made you say, hey, maybe it is more about them, whoever the them is, finding their own way?
Yes. So I'll mention this a couple ways. So, wow, it's interesting to look back at early on in my career versus the mindset I have now. Early on in my career, especially being in the world of recruitment, which some might not realize can be very competitive, very cutthroat. You are out there to get the candidate, especially in a world of executive search. So it is, think of, very much a sales atmosphere. You want to be the one to produce. You want to be successful. It is all about you. At least where I was working, it was not about the team, right? So I had to very much adjust my mindset. I think in interviewing for another executive search firm at one point in time, I talked maybe too much about my success. That was a reason I didn't get the opportunity, because I wasn't focused on the team. And then, over time, especially as I've taken on more responsibility, you get to also that point where you say, oh my goodness, I can't handle all of this. And as you start to, take on again more, you realize you have individuals that are experts in certain arenas: logistics, customer experience, HR, you name it. And that person, they're being paid to be the expert. It's not you, it's them. So really realizing that person has the expertise, that person has the knowledge, we need to be counting on them. pulling away and not being as involved in the day to day has been a little hard for me sometimes. I'm slightly type A, so I like to know everything that's going on, but I have a great team that I trust, and trust was never the issue. It really wasn't. It was more just wanting to help to create an environment where this team is successful, but knowing that in order for them to succeed, you need to pull away and they need to forge their own journey. So it's I reflect back on those milestones that have taken to me to where I've been, and a lot of mistakes along the way. But that's kind of what created that adjustment in mindset.
That's great. All right, Freddie.
Well, what do you think, Bridget, for the
Think
whip
we're ready.
round, women in propane round, whip round? Are you ready, Christina?
I am.
So I'll start. What do you keep in the trunk of your car?
Oh my goodness. As I mentioned, I have 2 small children, so absolutely everything.
I thought you were going to say your 2 small children.
No, there is often a change of clothes for everyone in the family. Probably some skis. I mean, everything you can absolutely imagine. It can be in my trunk of my car at any given time.
That's awesome. Okay. If you were to write a book about your career so far, and it can be a previously used title, what would the title be?
She was told she couldn't, so she did.
There you
love
go.
it.
What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate.
See?
That was quick to answer. I like that. Okay, here's another one. Describe yourself in one word.
Motivated.
Love it.
Good. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, to stop time.
Oh, I
That's
love
Wow.
that. Oh,
I like that
love
answer.
that.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, I feel like that's going to jar me all day. Okay. What advice would you give your 16-year-old self?
Oh, I got this one. So I'd say you're doing it right. Continue to have fun. You have the rest of your life to be professional and to be serious. And I would also tell her there's lots of different types of smart. There's street smart and there's book smart. And you are the right amount of smart.
Oh,
Good
I
advice.
love
That's
that.
great advice. Christina, if you were not in the propane industry, what would be your ideal career?
So let's see. I've always, before joining the industry and before starting my career, wanted to have my own business. I always envisioned I would own something, I would run something. I just didn't know what discipline it would be in. If I had not joined the propane industry, one road I was originally going down was having my own executive search business, similar to what my earlier mentor had really started, Jeannie Branover, who I mentioned earlier. But, I don't know. I think, again, something that I would own and build, but the type of industry, it really could be anything.
But just your own. Yep.
Just your own.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
It was
Yeah,
so
thank
nice
you for
to
being on our
have you here
podcast.
today.
This was great. This was awesome. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. This has been another episode of Through the Leadership Lens presented by Women in Propane. Be sure to subscribe, download, and share with a friend. To learn more about Women in Propane, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or online at www.womeninpropane.org. I'm Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd. Thanks for listening. Until next time.